Alright, so let's catch up to speed. So we suspect, as far as I understand, as far as Kane has established in his universe, that there was one guy who started the Backrooms. He began this whole thing, right? Is it Ivan Beck? Possibly, right? Now, from what we can glean from all these videos, is that the Backrooms is copying our world, right? But it's also copying very specific things in our world. And it seems before major contact was made with the Backrooms, that the things that it was copying was stuff related to Ivan Beck. It was his goal. See, like, from what could be possible is, because clearly Ivan Beck doesn't care about anyone. He doesn't care about the people in the Institute. He doesn't care about the well-being of the world. It seems like he's like a one-man army, but he went out of his depth. So he needs his assistance, but only to the point where he gets his thing. And this thing rotates around him. Now, the Backrooms, you got different layers, right? You got the structural layer, where it's just copying furniture. Straightforward, easy, until you get to still life, which is obviously a bit more difficult to copy, because not only do people move around, which is why there's a reason why artists ask people to stand still when they draw them, right? And that's what the Backrooms is doing. But not only is it a bit more difficult to copy just based on that, you could say a person is more complicated than a chair. Like a chair is pretty straightforward. You just like the movie was talking about how you describe a dog to someone. If you're gonna try to get a success, when it comes to copying something, it's probably you're gonna have a better success when you have a stranger who hasn't seen anything. You're probably gonna have a better success trying to get them to draw a chair than draw a person's mind and how they behave and how they move around. But given enough time, given enough interference, you probably could get a pretty good picture. Oh, good picture. We see what a good picture looks to the Backrooms, but you would get a general idea, especially if you had a lot of practice and a lot of options to do so. And then after that, as far as we've seen the final layer of the Backrooms, you get to the entity. Now, it seems like the entity is connected heavily to the bacteria. Is the bacteria the cause of the entity, or did the Backrooms create the entity? We don't know. But we do know it's got to do something with that bacteria, which happens when somebody dies in the Backrooms. Now, here's the question. The copy of Clark we see in the movie, was that a still life, or was that the entity, right? The one that comes from the bacteria. Because we didn't really see that in the movie anywhere. You didn't really see any deceased people. Actually, you did. You saw the fridge, and it was fine. I thought in the series it rapidly grows. Now, I don't think it is a still life, because a still life, you can, according to Clark, you can eat it, right? It's like a bread that you can just cut into. Now, there's probably something to be said about that, since still life comes from the impressions of people, as in your idea of what a person is. And if you can feed on still life, is there something there? Is there something implying that perhaps you can feed on your own thoughts, that you can just feed on your own delusions, possibly? And the thing that copied Clark, that had blood on it, right? It was, and which he pointed out on the mural he drew for probably several days, exploring. We don't even know what the timeline there is. How long was he separated after the camera got picked up by the entity, right? But that mural alone, you could probably make an entire video. Like that one section, that one scene, the whole movie, that's like 60% of the meat of that movie. You read that mural, you decrypt that, you probably get most of the picture. Which was like a surprise to Clark when it killed him, right? So, because I think Clark thought it was a still life. I think Clark thought that, but it turns out it wasn't. It was the entity instead. So, if it was the entity and not a still life, why? Because again, Backrooms has everything to do with Ivan Beck. It starts with him, right? And then people enter the backrooms, they start to interfere, which causes the backrooms to change shape. Now, this whole thing is for Ivan Beck. Ivan Beck lost something, so he's trying to get it back, and he's trying to get that back through the backrooms. But he can't do that because he's out of his depth, so he needs fodder. And that's where the scientists come in, anyone stumbling into the backrooms, all those people are there essentially just as cannon fodder for Ivan Beck. The problem is, Ivan Beck thinks, as far as I suspect, Ivan Beck thinks, just like Clark. I think Ivan Beck thinks he's in control of the backrooms. But just like Clark, he's not. The backrooms is entirely separate to him. Yes, it originated from him, but it's entirely separate. I think that's his biggest issue. I think Ivan Beck thinks it has to do with him. But the thing is, Ivan Beck was the first one to make contact with the backrooms, so therefore that's the first resource the backrooms was able to use. The first resource it was able to use to copy something, right? But once other people start coming into the backrooms, now their influence was coming in. So it changes that, right? Now, the bacteria, which has to do with the entity, what is its mission? What is its goal? Because we obviously saw some kind of a den in the movie. We saw a den of some kind where it just gathers all the people that he just kills, and it uses it as like a body farm, essentially. Just look up corpse farm if you want an idea what the entity is trying to harness. I'm assuming it's like this bacteria, it needs it, because when we originally see the entity, it's just a skeletal form. It has no flesh on it. It has no form. But now in the movie, we see that the entity it's pretty solid, right? And the still lives are also connected to it in a way. It's like an echo of the entity, a layer of the entity, an extension maybe of the entity. We see that the entity, it's clearly that the entity has to do with if the backrooms has nothing to do. Ivan Beck thinks he's control of the backrooms, but he doesn't control the backrooms. What he does control, I think, is the entity. Now, I think Ivan Beck and Clark are probably very similar people. If you want to know a bit more about Ivan Beck, I think you need to look more at Clark. Now, what was Clark's whole deal? Clark's whole deal, you have the whole divorce story, right? But that's just that's just the impression of who he is. There's obviously something deeper going on there, or at least as far as the backroom goes. Like again, what did the backrooms copy from Clark? It didn't copy his wife, which would make sense, right? Because his whole deal is he was stuck on this loop, right? He was stuck. He couldn't get over the fact that he messed up his marriage. He couldn't get over that, so he got stuck in that loop where you get progressively worse and worse and worse, right? He degraded and he degraded and he degraded, because every time the loop started again, it just gets worse every time. It's like you make a mistake, right? As far as Backrooms, what does the Backrooms care about people? What does it want to copy? What does it want to retain from people? Well, the main thing it wants to retain is our insistence on repeating the same thing. It's like that quote from Far Cry, right? Insanity. What is insanity? What is the definition of insanity? Essentially, that's what, as far as the backroom, that's what it cares about us. At least when it comes to what the power, right? If you want to imagine the backrooms as like a source of magic, right? Like a source of mana or whatever. Like the one thing that influences the backrooms is this human behavioral pattern where we make a mistake, and instead of getting over that mistake, right? Instead of trying to move on, what we do is we relive a certain lifestyle, and sort of like we think that the earth is going to rotate, right? And so the earth rotates, so we make our lives rotate. So we make a mistake, and then instead of moving on, we try to repeat the behaviors. We try to repeat the patterns in hopes that when we get back around to a similar scenario, to a similar place, we'll suddenly fix everything, right? Next time I'll do everything the same, but once I get back around to the same point, I'll suddenly change. I'll suddenly fix it. But of course that doesn't happen, because in the case of Clark, his wife already moved on. They were already done. But Clark, instead, he just kept looping and looping and looping, right? And he was all alone, and he didn't have to change. So that's what that's what influences the backrooms, right? Those people who get obsessed about a moment in their lives, and so they try to relive that moment over and over and over again in hopes of retaining, just rechanging it. And that's what the backrooms gravitates from. However, what is then the still life? If the furniture, the structure of the backrooms, is just the attempt to essentially transition a memory from this world into the back room, if it's just like a transition, okay, so you keep reliving your memory in your head, and then the back rooms, which is trying to keep recopying that until hopefully eventually it will retain that memory completely and just have it inside there. Then what is the entities? What's the still life? What's the bacteria? Now I think the big mystery is, as you could say, it's a chicken and the egg scenario. You have to figure out where the bacteria comes from, because obviously we all have some degree of viruses on us in this world. Like, even if you're not sick, there's always some degree of bacteria on you. So it makes sense, if you enter this foreign realm, you would take that with you without knowing it. So what if, right, if the backrooms is already copying people and sort of to try to favor them, right? It gravitates from that. What is the still life? Well, first you need a house to live in. You don't get the person first. First you get the house. So that's what the backrooms is doing first. Whichever people it finds the most influential, it takes those people and it uses them. The more dogmatic you are, the more stubborn you are, the stronger the influence in the backrooms. The stronger the pull, the stronger the copy is in the backrooms. Then what happens when you die? Well, see, that's foreign to the backrooms. It doesn't understand that concept. as far as it cares, the backrooms might be physical, but as far as how it functions, it might as well be a smoke, like a smoke screen. The same way you couldn't really say a mind, a soul, a consciousness is physical. It's not, right? It's synapses, it's something happening in the brain, but you couldn't really materialize something like that. So what does it do with a life that doesn't have entirely a brain, but it's still a sort of life? We have these bacteria that don't do anything when we initially die. No, when we are alive, right? We have all these bacteria that actually help us when we are alive. But the moment we die, these bacteria activate and they start to disintegrate us, right? They start to destroy us. Now, in the backrooms, obviously the backrooms doesn't function the same as the real world. So it seems that, well, isn't there a theory, did everything evolve from bacteria? So it's like a second world. It's a copy of our world, right? It's like take reality and you start from scratch, right? So if you have a human being, it enters the backrooms, it dies, you have these microbes. Now these microbes in the real world, they just fade away. Enter the soil, they disintegrate a body and they enter the soil and they go on from there. But in the backrooms, it's like you have the event horizon. You have the beginning of life. You have the beginning. It's a new world. And this world is this world is supercharged. So, of course, if you bring a body in there and it dies, these bacteria are getting supercharged from the backrooms. So it starts to, first it disintegrates the body, but then it tries to rejuvenate a body. It tries to bring it up. But of course, it's just bacteria. It's just these tiny little children who don't understand what they're doing. All they know is that they're alive, they're sentient, and they want to go on. So of course, they look around them and they look for the strongest source. And one of those sources, at first, was Ivan Beck. But then, when he doesn't have Ivan Beck, because I don't think he is in the backrooms, I don't think he's visited since. He sent the scientists in. But the second closest source it was able to find was Clark. Now, of course, the backrooms is the entity, The entity is probably absolutely terrified of the real world. Right? It doesn't want anything to do with that, because as far as it cares, as far as it thinks, probably, it's like asking a person, because if we went from bacteria to fish to land mammals, of course, if you were to ask a modern person to go into the water, even though millions of years ago it was living there just fine, of course they would be against that. Now, you have this bacteria who just started to evolve. You take that bacteria and you try to tell it, hey, go on land. It's gonna be scared of everything. It's gonna be scared of that shit. So it doesn't want to do that. So of course, when Clark was like, hey, it's time to move on, it's time to change, it was basically threatening the entity with its food source, because Clark was providing it with the strongest food source, right? Clark was this dogmatic guy stuck in this lifestyle, was unable to move on. And of course, when he entered the backrooms and he became complicit to that life, he enjoyed it, it became harmony, because Clark was a food source. It fed the backrooms. The backrooms was able to copy him, was able to take him and just use him as a material, as a resource to amplify itself. So of course everything was harmonic, right? The entity didn't want to kill him, and he was great. But the moment he was like, it's time to move on, he just broke the cycle. He just stopped feeding it. So it fed on him instead. It was like, fuck that shit, I'm eating you now. It was like a last-ditch effort. right? Just to reach in and kill him. So now the big question is, what did Ivan Beck do, right? If all of this, what's the purpose? What is the purpose? You have this Backrooms that didn't exist, as far as we know. It didn't exist up to a certain point. Ivan Beck did something, created the Backrooms. But now, like, why is it here? How could something like this be created? Well, I would like to introduce you all to a little concept called the collective unconscious. Now, this is a thing that is being explored in certain other media already, so I'm sure a lot of you are aware of it. But essentially, the theory is that every single human being is connected, either through dreams or just telepathically, in some sense, where every single person, no matter where on the globe, will collectively come to similar conclusions to certain things. You can take two human beings and you can put them opposite sides of the world, and they can live for hundreds of years with no contact, yet they will come up with similar concepts, similar discoveries, similar things. They don't make sense. They're not something that you can find out in the wild that's similar. They are just like nuances. They are little creations here and there, and they will just come up with the same thing. So there was a theory presented where it suggested that perhaps all human beings are connected by something. There's this dome or this realm where we all visit, either in our dreams or somewhere else. There's this place that we go and we share everything there. We find commonality, right? Now, if we imagine this theory as true, if we say that this reality is true, then what would happen if some foolish man like Ivan Beck, in his attempt to rewrite history, in his attempt to relive history, in an attempt to return, he cut into that. He discovered something, he did some stuff, and he cut into it. Well, what happens when you take a brain and you put severe trauma on it? Well, I don't know. I would say it creates a little brain damage, little problems here and there, and later on in life, like dementia. Now, when I saw Kane, use that very specific blue tape, when I saw him use that very specific blue tape to demarcate all those different null zones in his series, I was like, hold on. That right there, that looks like the caretaker. That looks very similar. That looks like the final stage in Everywhere at the End of Time. Huh. So, what if Ivan Beck discovered the collective unconscious? What if he actually discovered it? And not only did he discover it, what if Ivan Beck damaged it? And that's where we see the Backrooms. Now, you see the Backrooms, it's not working. It's not functioning properly. If the Backrooms is the collective unconscious, ideally speaking, it should be impossible for anyone to enter it. It should not be possible, because it's supposed to be this concept. Like, you go to sleep, you enter the mind, you enter the spiritual realm. You're not supposed to be able to enter that. It's like, it's a different layer. But if you damage it, now this layer is crashing into our world. Ivan Beck pierced it, right? Now, people are entering this realm all the time now, so it's creating more. It's like it's grasping at straws. It's trying to find some anchor, and it can't. Just like a dementia-ridden mind will try to. Once the mind starts to deteriorate, it will try to relive certain memories over and over and over again, in an attempt to retain some semblance of control, some semblance of structure. That seems like what the Backrooms is doing. So when strong sources enter, like Clark, it feels at peace. It feels harmonious. So it seems like that is what's happening here. Now, as far as I remember, the Backrooms on the YouTube goes beyond the timeline in the movie, and it's still functioning relatively well, right? Nothing has completely collapsed. There's no Armageddon yet. There's some kind of problem with the Institute, some kind of mutiny happening there. But as far as it goes with the Backrooms, it's all as it used to be. Everything is the same. But we just brought up the fact that you have the structure of the Backrooms. You have the still life that comes after to sort of fill the structure of the Backrooms, give it some sort of life, like a shadow realm, kind of copying the things, try to appease, try to find some way of grounding itself again. Then what happens, because we established that the entity is heavily connected to the Backrooms. Its consciousness is essentially the Backrooms, right? It thinks based on that. But it's also separate, because if it is a bacteria from the outside that just evolved inside the Backrooms, in theory, it should function quite well outside of it, right? It should be able to, if it evolves high enough, it should no longer be dependent on the Backrooms. And then what happens? What happens when you have a life form like that, so unstable, created under such circumstances, and it evolves? We already know it evolves very quick. What happens when it reaches its zenith? That's the question. We do have the part, though, where the Backrooms seem to be already bleeding into our world. There was the switches. That's something we haven't seen. As far as we thought, it was only the effects of the Backrooms only happened in the Backrooms. Now, I can't really answer that question unless Ivan Beck has in fact uncovered something or done something, assuming. But I have another question. And I think at the end of the day, it just might mean a bit more than the Backrooms itself. Because, the day will come when the Backrooms will end. We'll see how it goes. But we'll remember portions of the Backrooms. And I'm very interested in a certain aspect. Now, it's quite clear that Kane was inspired heavily by certain aspects, certain themes, certain genres that have already existed and been told, concluded even. And I think, I'm not blaming him, right? Everyone, that's just creativity. You take inspirations from other things, you bring them in. But it's not so much that I'm criticizing it. I wanted to bring up, now it's, what it is I think it's kind of meta. If Kane truly intended to bring in the concept of the noosphere, the concept of the collective unconscious into his story, try to represent it, and then he also used a bit of the caretaker and some other aspects here and there, I think Kane might actually be doing something unconsciously. Like, I think to some extent he is not even aware of what he's creating. What I'm trying to get at is, when I'm looking at this series, this Backroom series, and I'm seeing how it started from just an image, just a simple image on a forum, just a little thread at the bottom, no idea about what it is going to be, right? Unless Kane posted that first image, unless it's all, a big plan. But it is this thread, right, of how it just became this larger than life and went on to make all kinds of games, and created this whole series, and now we have one of the best movies of this year. It's just, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, we've had a certain type of movies come out for a while. We've had some kind of media, and none of it is our media, if that makes sense. It's not, I'm assuming most of us listening to this video are probably in the younger demographic. And so when I say our media, I mean to say it's not something that speaks to us. And something that does speak to us pertains to this concept that we're all collectively discovering. We are all creating this bigger picture. Now, the Backrooms is like a piece. Whoever the right person will be that will see this series, see its conclusion, and get something out of it, they will take that piece and they'll find another piece and put it together and put it together. And that is what I'm interested in. You see, I think our generation right now, we might be creating a picture. It's not really like terribly important as far as I can glean myself, but this picture, I don't know if I should be concerned or I should be excited for, because if we're all creating this picture and we don't even know when we're doing it, we're all creating this one image. Who is directing us? What is inspiring us to go forward to create this one singular vision, a combination of all these parts? The whole concept of liminal space, concept of an empty place that feels haunted even though it's not supposed to be. In between. And that is what fascinates me. This whole idea that we have this I think the idea of liminal space has existed before, but obviously it didn't mean much because we're only hearing about it really right now. And why are we so drawn to this idea? Because it's like you ask a boomer, what shopping mall, empty shopping mall, what's wrong with you, right? But to us, we look at that and we're so confused by that, because it's like we look at an empty space and now we see full spaces, right? We see them and it doesn't mean anything else. But when we see an empty space, it has more meaning than when it's filled. Because a filled space is just noise. It's just this noise without purpose. But an empty space, a liminal space, it's for like a boomer or like any other generation before us. They would go through these spaces and they wouldn't have to stop and think. Right? They got places to be, they got things to do. But to our generations, it's like walking into the terracotta in China in the modern time. Like, we go there now. You go to the terracotta army today and you see they're just clay. The color is faded. So you don't feel anything really, because it looks like it's supposed to, right? It looks like it's old. Whatever ideals the Chinese Empire had, it's gone with them. It's moved on. It served its purpose. Now it's our time, right? But a liminal space is like that, happening in real time right now. We are going into these spaces. We go our lives, and we come across these empty spaces. It's like for just a second, for just a second, honesty comes through. Because when you have a crowded space, you see people and like you fall into this belief that everything is fine, right? It's busy, it's bustling. But when you get to the right time of day where life is still, and you see, you get washed over this sense of honesty And it's terrifying because the honesty is it's over. That's the honesty. The honesty is we are dead men walking. It's all over. Our time has come and gone. So if that's the big image that we're creating, if that's the we are preparing for the big Armageddon, right? We're creating this grand masterpiece so we can celebrate the end of the world. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we might not have any choice at all, but we'll see. We don't have the full picture, right? There's still a couple more pieces that have to come along, but I don't know. I don't know if I'll really enjoy seeing that.